also a doctor that can make you feel good. His name is Dr. Feel Good, of course, and we play that song with good reason because I believe we have the doctor on right now coming up here soon. Doctor, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm going to fire up on the video side of things here in a second. Again, we're on AM 1230, 104.7 FM, as far as that radio side is concerned. Also on the TuneIn app, stream anywhere throughout the world with that TuneIn app. On JED TV, now officially on JED TV, Amazon, Roku, Apple TV. And I am going to put us on Facebook Live here because I know you guys like to share some stuff around. So let me hit live with that. And we are live on there once again. Tony Panic here inside the Strachan Van Til studios. And of course, from time to time, we like to have the good doctor, Dr. Sean Kondamuri, a Midwest interventional spine specialist, come on the program. Doctor, it's been a few weeks since I last talked to you. How you doing, doctor?
I'm doing fantastic, Tony. How about you?
I'm doing fine. You looks like you're keeping healthy and healthy, and that's good because you're a doctor. You want to see your doctor happy and healthy because, hey, if your doctor's not happy and healthy, then what good is he?
Well, we got to be an example for our patients, right? When I tell my patients, to exercise and not smoke and, some of those things that are sometimes difficult to stop, those bad habits, if I'm sitting there smoking a cigarette in front of them, I'm not a very good example, right? If I'm not exercising, I'm not a good example. So I want to try to be that example for my patients.
It's funny. Back in the day, doctor, and this was way before I was born here, but doctors used to smoke in the office. When did that stop?
It should have stopped, 2020. I would imagine it should have stopped around 1990. Clearly it did not, but around that time we should have known about the hazards of smoking. I mean, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, might have been a little bit questionable. We didn't know for sure how harmful it was, but it's been quite clear for the last 30 years, at least.
No, because that was always strange, because you see those ads, the doctors sitting it says 7 out of 10 doctors recommend this cigarette. It's like toothpaste, it's basically they were saying, hey, if you're going to have this cigarette, this one is the healthy cigarette for you. So it's amazing how far we have come in the past couple decades here.
Things change all the time, right? I mean, we have different ways of looking at things. Even with COVID-19, right? A year ago, we thought some things, and 10 months ago, we thought about things differently, and 6 months ago, it was different. It's like as we get more and more information, you have to be ready to adjust your opinions and beliefs about certain things.
No, for sure. And it's strange. I mean, people were smoking everywhere. Smoking was the cool thing to do, and of course, it's a bad habit. A lot of people are locked into that bad habit, and it's tough to get off smoking. I know you specialize in a lot of things, but is there a key to it? I mean, everybody's different, but boy, oh boy, I know some people that just can't kick that habit.
I think ultimately it becomes something. I mean, the few people that I've heard that really stopped smoking really just did it cold turkey. As hard as that might sound, that's the one way it seems to really stop. I mean, it's just like drinking. In fact, it's as addictive as drinking or anything else. You stop and you get some support around you, and hopefully you stay away from cigarettes.
No, for sure. Well, that darn Camel.
There's lots of other things. We have other medical options too, right? We have medications you can give people and all kinds of programs, but hypnosis is even out there for hypnosis and psychologic interventions. But I think ultimately just stop cold turkey.
Yeah, it's tough. I know that darn Camel. They used to have those when I was a kid in magazines. Joe Cool was his name, and they were like, "Oh man,
Right.
if you're cool if you smoke some Camels here." And
Exactly.
then there was a point in time where they had to stop that because it was advertising to kids. It was a mascot that was kind of kid friendly, so they didn't want the kids getting hooked on that.
Even the Juuls, even vaping was at one time advertised directly to kids. Even the flavors like bubble gum and watermelon flavors that were really attractive to kids. And finally, that was stopped. I mean, at least the government got ahead of that quick, and they said you can't advertise like that.
Well, because that was advertised. If you had say you had a hard time quitting smoking, vaping was the thing to get you off smoking. But then
Right.
people were realizing the dangers of vaping.
Exactly.
So it's like taking one bad thing to get rid of another bad thing.
It's like that. There's a lot of examples of that, especially in my field. I mean, we have people who are addicted to opioids, prescription pills, and many of them get onto methadone or Suboxone. There are clinics out there. We're not that kind of clinic, but there are clinics out there that prescribe methadone or Suboxone, which are medications that are used to kind of prevent the withdrawal symptoms so that you get off of your heroin or off of your prescription pills that you're addicted to. And there's some benefit to that. I don't want to completely criticize the program, but in some cases, patients who have an addictive behavior are just using that Suboxone to stay free of their withdrawal symptoms until their next hit. And, it's like I feel like it's a little too easily prescribed for patients, and patients are kept on these drugs for way too long when we ought to be weaning them off entirely so that, they get away from any kind of addictive medications.
Well, it's funny you bring up some stuff like that because we have a guy that works here, and he won't mind me saying this because he talked about it on the air, Sam Michael. And he gave up cookies and sweets for Lent, but he found himself eating more maybe fried foods or foods that are bad for you. So you take away the sweets, but then you substitute that with bad fried foods. You can't win, doctor.
You can't win, Tony. I mean, I'm the same way. If you put some chocolate in front of me, I mean, it's difficult sometimes to say no to the chocolate. I mean, but we have to try, because all these behaviors are, they're in a way, they're kind of built into our psyche, and we eat more, not necessarily because we're hungry, but because we are feeding something else in our system. We have a worry or frustration or sadness that we're feeding. And sometimes you want to get down to the root cause for why you're doing these things.
And, they say dark chocolate. If you're going to eat chocolate, dark chocolate is the way to go. Is that true?
I think it is probably the way to go, but it doesn't taste as good, right, Tony?
No,
it's not
it doesn't.
As sweet.
No, it doesn't. A glass of wine a day and chocolate a day, I think, keep the doctor away. Something like that. I don't know, maybe something apples. Like but if you like apples.
Eat all the apples you want. That's pretty healthy.
It keeps the doctor away, if they still say that saying. Before we get into anything at all, 219-845-1100. That's the Carpenter's Local 599 phone line. If you wish to chime in, maybe have a question for the doctor, 219-845-1100. Carpenter's Local 599 phone line. For folks that may be the first time hearing about this program, first time hearing from you, doctor, tell us a little about the place and what you guys specialize in.
So we're interventional pain specialists and spine specialists. So we deal with all kinds of spinal conditions. Spine pain, whether it's coming from your back or your neck, that causes pain down into your arms or down into your legs. Pain that can be due to a chronic sciatica, or pain from a long-standing disc herniation, or in some of our older patients, pain from spinal stenosis that causes narrowing in the spine. And that narrowing can very often impinge the nerve and cause pain right down your arm, right down your leg. And we treat a lot of that with minimally invasive procedures, minor surgeries, physical therapy, and medications. And we can almost always, in at least 75% of patients, get these patients either free of their pain or significantly reduce their pain without any kind of major surgery.
I think a lot of people are concerned when they start having problems with their back or spine or anything. Like, oh no, I don't want to get this checked out because it might require surgery. A lot of cases, maybe not the case.
Absolutely not the case. Most patients can do very well with seeing a physical therapist or a chiropractor. If that doesn't help you, then you need to come and see somebody like us. And very often we can get those patients much better without having to have big surgery.
What's the phone number there if anybody's has more questions about that?
219-836-7246, and 7246 spells out pain. 836 pain.
That's clever. I always wondered about those things too. Like they really have to, Empire commercials or anything that has to do with the product as far as
we don't have a catchy jingle like the Empire commercials.
You gotta have a catchy jingle. Maybe think about something after there. You could create something. You're a smart guy, but is it hard to get those numbers to correlate with? I mean, do you have to put an application in for something like that?
I think we just asked and it was available, so we took it.
Yeah. Why not? Was that at the top of the list, or do you have a few others before that?
No, I think that was it.
Okay.
Before we were 934, I think. Many years ago, 934 is what we were further down the street from where we are now. And then we moved up closer to the hospital, and now in this area it's 836. But it was the same 7246 spelling out pain at the end. That was always there. Very
clever there, doctor. Well, the last time you were on, when I talked to you at least, I know Jed talked to you a couple times since then, but the last time I talked to you, we talked kind of a little bit about mental health, and it's not just about physical health, but also about mental health as well. And, we talk a lot about the, grown adults, but not too much about the youth and the children. And over this past year and few months, boy, oh boy, mental health and the youth, that's got to be something that has shaken up. It's always been an issue, and a lot of people don't like talking about it. But again, after this past year, everybody's isolated. They're home alone. They're staring at the computer screens. Little to no social interaction. You got to wonder about the mental health of some of these youngsters out there today. Just how important is the mental health and taking a look at mental health in our youth?
It's very important, Tony. I'm glad you bring it up because, as you said, these kids, preteens and teenagers, many of them are at home doing classes like distance learning, online learning. Some of them are in school, but many of them are at home. And there's definitely a fair amount of loneliness, anxiety, and loss that's been described in these kids. Kids who might have been AB students last winter, their grades dropped in the spring, and they now may have dropped a full grade down to being BC students. Then the summer comes along, and they haven't seen their friends very much during COVID, whether they're in school or not. And then summer comes along, and their local summer camp or their theater camp or their baseball camp is now canceled. So they don't have a whole lot to do. They don't get to enjoy that those 3 months of summer that are so much what we look forward to when we're kids. And then the family vacation they might have had might be postponed or even canceled. Then they return to school in the fall, and that maybe brings some relief. But not all kids are in school. Many of them stayed home and are still studying virtually. And some kids don't have their parents there with them. If both parents are working, the kids might be alone at home trying to make ends meet. And even the teachers, they're talking to their, they have to teach to kids in the classroom and teach the kids on the computers. So a lot of times they're just talking into their computer and maybe not able to give full attention to the kids in the classroom. So both sides are struggling a little bit. And I think kids, they want to do well. But if they don't understand something, if they're not getting that normal teaching that they used to have, then what can happen is their grades are going to suffer. They're going to get discouraged. You add on to that, if you had a parent, or if they had a parent or a grandparent who got sick with COVID, or God forbid died, that's pretty devastating for kids. They don't say it, but if they lose a grandparent, that's pretty tough for them, right? That grandparent is such a loving person. That role can't be replaced. Oftentimes you can't replace that by a parent. A parent has to be kind of a disciplinarian at the same time, and a grandparent can be just fun and loving. And you lose that grandparent, and these kids have a tough time. Parents themselves might be grief-stricken from the loss of their parent. Maybe they're struggling with finances. Maybe they don't have their job the way they used to. And if they're struggling, they're not able to be more, they're not able to be the most effective parents. And then what ultimately happens, and has happened, and kids will admit it, they go to social media. They'll be on TikTok, they'll be on Snapchat talking to their friends. They even admit that during class time, if they're at home, they're talking to their friends, via Snapchat, because they need that social connection. You can't, as addictive as social media is, you can't blame them if they're sitting alone at home and they don't get to see their friends. They're going to be doing that all the time. So naturally, their studies are going to suffer even more.
Well, that's interesting, because we talked, say, before COVID, they would always say, well, social media, that could really affect your mental health as well. You see stuff online, people, I guess this goes for adults too. You look at other people's lives, right? You see that they're having fun, they're posting their vacation pictures, they're really posting the good things about their life, and you see that and be like, oh boy, well, why can't I be like that? Why can't I live up to that? Why can't I go on these cool vacations? Why can't I do these fun things?
Then why can't it be so beautiful as that girl who's on
that's right.
on that Instagram post? If you're a teenage girl, that's very difficult.
Yeah, no,
you can never meet up to that standard, right?
So I get nowadays, it's really, in the past year, they used it to hang out with their friends or see their friends, but before that, it was basically saying, well, social media, it's really affecting kids' health, because a long time ago, there was really, you just kind of lived your life, and you really didn't compare yourself to other people's as far as online presence, and now you got to deal with all of that. So they said social media in the past, ever since MySpace or something like that, really takes a toll on the child's health, and I guess you could say adults' health as well. We always compare ourselves to other people. So,
well, there's millennials and there's Gen Zs, right? The Gen Z category, the kids who are teenagers now, they couldn't avoid social media. Millennials, they kind of were right. The younger ones were able to. The older ones definitely avoided social media. The younger ones.
When I was in high school, it really started hitting then. So, but now grade school level, they got cell phones on social media.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, it's very difficult for these kids to not want to check out what's going on social media and especially their friends and the people they look up to, whether it's like sports stars or celebrities. They're always checking out their pages, and it is difficult. But you add all the difficulty they had before COVID, and now you add on how the days are so. In many ways, the days are exactly the same for kids, and it's hard to stay motivated.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get to, freely. It's changing now, of course. Obviously, more people are getting vaccinated, so it's changing. So I'm just talking about the ill effects of what happened over the last year. But I'm really very confident, or very optimistic, I should say, that things are going to be better. More and more people. I think we're like 21% of the country is now fully vaccinated. that number's, probably most likely rising.
Well, there's a study about that. We'll talk about that in a few seconds, but take it back to the mental health issue with the kids out there as far as those struggling with mental issues. I think a lot of times too, doctor, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, kids just really don't know who to talk to about it as well. I mean, if they talk to other kids about it, they may be afraid they're going to be made fun of or something like that. They talk to their parents about it. They may not think they take them seriously. So, and then you can't just call up a doctor that has a 12 or 13-year-old. So a lot of times there's really nowhere to turn for these kids.
That's a great point, Tony, because, just like we parents are sometimes very different, we have different opinions about COVID, where some people are very worried about things and they're very cautious, wearing their mask all the time. And then some adults, feel very relaxed and they don't wear their masks and they don't think it's a big deal. Similarly with kids, if that kid has been exposed to a family member who actually got sick, or a parent or grandparent who got critically ill or died, they're very cautious. And then they're in school or they're out there, and then they see their friends who may not feel it's that serious a problem, and they're walking around without their masks, or they're laughing in school, and then they're like, I have nobody to. I mean, they feel confused almost because they know it hit their family, but the other person doesn't feel that way. And they used to, early on in COVID-19, they used to have a lot of kids getting together in what we call COVID pods, where parents would set up time for kids to meet together and study together, socially distanced when they couldn't go to school. But then those things started sort of falling apart. They fell apart, and people weren't doing that anymore. So people kids lost touch with their friends, and friends who might have been friends since kindergarten are no longer their friends anymore, for whatever reason, because of all what's going on. So they become isolated. They're socially isolated during these lockdowns. There's family stress, remote teaching hits them. All these interruptions that happen with their parents' jobs and all leads to depression and anxiety. And, if you don't have friends to hang out with, on a regular basis like they used to, then they're going to feel lonely.
No, but is there, I mean, I don't know, I guess if there's somebody struggling out there, maybe let's say a young person or just, again, anybody, is there there's hotlines, of course, you could turn to, but would you suggest basically kind of maybe just try to get out there and make friends? I mean, is it as simple as that, you think?
The pediatricians and the psychologists will tell you that the biggest driver of well-being in a child is how his parents are functioning.
Okay.
So if the parents are functioning well, likely the kid will be functioning well. Not always, but at least more likely. If the parents are overly stressed and they're not able to parent well, and they're dealing with their own anxiety issues, that kid is left alone to fend for himself in many cases. So it starts off at the family level. Parents should try to at least, put on a good face, try to support the kids in any way they can. The preteen years around puberty are the years of greatest neuroplasticity. So the brain is really very plastic and it's going through changes. So that's the time when kids start forming identities and they start separating from their parents. It's a very critical time where, crazy things can happen. It's also not surprising the time when mental health issues like depression, anxiety, eating disorders will start emerging. So the really good news, though, is let's not paint a totally negative picture here, because the good news is that a lot of these troubling problems can improve on their own. They can improve just by providing good experiences to the kids and supporting them through their challenges with some good advice, support, love. Those are the things that the kids want, and they want. If you ever talk to a kid and you're trying to, convince them to do what you want as a parent, you're not a parent yet, I don't think, Tony, are you?
No, not that I know about, doctor. I don't think so.
You were on the other side of that relationship once, and what we find, what anybody knows, you can have a really abrasive relationship with your child where they don't believe you, they don't trust you, they don't want to listen to you, and if they know you love them, and that love is just, there's just no doubt about that, they're more likely to be open.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing we talk about.
Well, that's the thing too. You mentioned, preteen, and I remember as a kid, like, hey, mom, drop me off down the block. Drop me off down the block. You don't have to drop me off right at the door. I'm fine. I can walk a little bit. For a parent, I think that's probably the most difficult time, trying to connect with your child at that stage of the game. Any tips or something like how to, maybe the preteen doesn't want to really talk to the parents now that much? Is there a way to Is it just going through the motions, or is there a tool to help those parents out that kind of connect on a one-on-one basis with their
You
child?
know, and I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a child counselor or anything like that. I'm just a parent. I have three boys of my
Yeah,
own. Two of them are in their 20s, and one's a high school sophomore. And all I can tell you from my own experience, I think you have to be there for your kids. You have to love your kids. You have to let them know that regardless of whatever they do or whatever they decide to do, you still love them. You're still there for them. If they know that, then when you have the occasional, arguments or occasional
of course.
stress,
Yeah.
you give them a hug, as uncomfortable as that might be. That physical contact really, I think, makes a big difference.
To take it back to social media, is there a
Yeah.
recommendation by doctors as far as how much social media a day? Because I have an iPhone now, doctor, and it tells me how it's bad. I tell you, it
Well,
tells.
I'm going to be a parent
It's,
here, Tony. I'm going to tell you what I think you should do. If
yeah,
you have an iPhone, if you're a parent, you have a kid who's got an iPhone, this is my opinion, even a high school kid, you put you block his phone. You put time blocks in there that's available on the iPhone. You have screen time. You can set the screen time to 2.5 hours,
okay.
2 hours, 3 hours, whatever you think is appropriate for your son or daughter. But if you let it be completely free for them to do whatever they want, and you don't lock out, for example, after 11 p.m. or after 10 p.m., guess what? They're going to be using their phone in bed. If they're not sleeping, and if they can't sleep, they're just going to reach for their phone, just like we adults do, and they're going to scroll through social media. But if you put a block on that, you block their screen time so that after 10 o'clock or after 11 o'clock, whatever's appropriate for that age group, that they can't use their phone anymore, they're locked out.
I'm just saying. I know after the end of every week, it tells you this was your update as far as how much social media you were on this past week. It blows my mind sometimes. How many
Right.
hours did I spend on Facebook? How is that
6 hours a
possible?
day, 8 hours a day, literally, right? That doesn't
Terrible.
make sense.
Yes.
I
Take it.
mean,
Uh, Go ahead, doctor.
No, I was just saying the same thing we talked about. Like I said, those neuroplastic, those very malleable minds of teenagers and preteens are very much affected by what they see online. And we have to. I think that your child may not like it at first. In fact, they won't like it if they're used to complete freedom with their phone. But I think you have to be a parent first and a friend later.
Sometimes
You
I have to
know,
remember what I did before those days in high school, as far as going outside and playing with my friends, as
right?
far as as
Encourage
opposed to
that.
being on the phone.
Right. Encourage, find activities for your child to do that he or she loves, whether it's a sport or something like, theater or something, whatever it is that they love, and then they can be occupied doing that, and they'll have less time to spend in front of their phone.
Well, we could talk, of course, a lot more about this subject, and then we might have
Yes.
to do it in future episodes. But we want to get to this because, of course, you mentioned people are getting vaccinated, uh, slowly coming out as far as things coming back to events happening and functions taking place. But then, doctor, I do the mistake of I turn on the news and I see case numbers are rising once again amongst younger people, people of my age, and all that stuff. And we talked about the youth and mental health, but what's happening right now as far as I in my head, the math adds up. If more people get vaccinated, the more they say, hey, we can go back to normal. We could sit with each other. We could take off our masks. We could do all that good stuff. But then I see stuff like this where cases are rising and it's amongst younger people. What the heck's going on, doctor?
Well, it's pretty clear that a lot of young people, people who are in their 20s, let's say, or even 30s, there's a higher percentage of that population that feel pretty invincible, and they feel like nothing's going to happen to them, and that this illness, this particular virus, is not going to affect them or their family members because they're really hanging out together. Spring break just happened in a lot of places around the country. There are hordes and hordes of kids hanging out, right in front of each other, having fun, partying without masks. And, it's not surprising we've had a bump in a lot of cases. And it is in the young people. And it's hard to, you don't want to be lecturing people, but they've heard it. They've heard it over and over in the media that we have to socially distance, that we have to, wear a mask. And we should get vaccinated. And when that happens, you'll see less of this. But every time we have big gatherings like spring break, like Easter, and now pretty soon Memorial Day weekend in the summer, you're going to see spikes in cases. Those spikes will be smaller and smaller as we get more and more vaccination, more and more people vaccinated around the country. But it's going to happen.
But you think for a lot of cases, you talk about the younger people, and of course, some people are choosing not to get vaccinated, of course. But a lot of older people are getting vaccinated, as you mentioned. Is there a way? the younger people are going to keep on probably doing what they're doing right now. I mean, are we? We're going to have surges for the rest of our lifetime, then, aren't we?
Well, no. At one point, as you get more and more, as we develop herd immunity, it will fizzle out.
Herd immunity. I remember that word.
Yeah. And that herd immunity, we hope it's going to be we're getting closer and closer to that. And then even if we do have illness, it'll be like the flu. It'll just be, mild illness, maybe some aches and pains and some mild low-grade fever, viral type symptoms, which are not that big a deal. But we want to get away from the point where we have serious illness. And all the vaccines out there are going to prevent the serious illness, the actual admissions to the hospital, and the deaths. That's what we want to stop.
Okay, guys, I know a lot of people. I try not to get too worked up over what I see on the news, but I know a lot of people see that, and they say, oh, boy, I just got vaccinated, but they're surging? What? Are we going to go through this once again, a whole year of lockdowns and shutdowns and people, of course, standing 6 feet away from each other and mask wearing? And they kind of get speaking of depression, they get depressed about that, doctor.
I know. I mean, so you've got like at some point, you're going to get a large number of people who are vaccinated. Then you have a large number of people who had the illness, so they have a natural immunity. So you have natural immunity, you have immunity from vaccination, and then hopefully that number approaches 70, 80%, and then you have herd immunity.
Okay, because I just know I saw one country they were testing concerts out, doctor, and they were all wearing masks, and it was like people that were vaccinated. A lot of studies going on. There's a lot of weird studies as far as, hey, what can we do this summer? What can't we do this summer? Is it going to be normal? So a lot of that's happening right now as we speak, doctor.
Well, I mean, there's all the talk about vaccine passports too, right? I mean, I'm sure you've read a lot about that. That's very controversial. So we all want to get back to concerts and weddings and sporting events. But at what point can we have that if we still have large numbers of people who are getting positive and mainly getting sick?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not quite sure.
We don't know. I mean, that's why some people say, well, we need the vaccine passports, so we can at least know. At least you can then have people in attending big events without you know who you can bring into the event or bring into the restaurant or bring into a large gathering. But then others will obviously say, well, it's impinging on my my freedoms. Mm-hmm. Because then you're going to potentially see a group of people who chose not to get a vaccine getting discriminated against because they chose not to get a vaccine.
Well, I don't know if you heard last week, doctor, there, and I guess, it is a controversial topic, of course, but Notre Dame here in the state of Indiana, they're saying, hey, if you want to come to school in the fall, you got to be vaccinated. Of course, they kind of look, if you have certain religious beliefs, then again, if you don't want to get a shot, can't you just say, hey, it's against my religious beliefs? There's a whole story about that. But Notre Dame, one of the first universities coming out saying, you know what, if you want to come here, you got to get vaccinated.
Well, there's a lot of other universities that are non-parochial, not faith-based, and they're also demanding the same thing. They've told their students clearly, if you want to come back on campus, you've got to get vaccinated. So individual businesses or organizations, they can make their own decisions. They don't require a federal mandate. They can do whatever they want.
Doctor, the weather's getting nice. It's a little bit windy today, but nothing too drastic. Are you going to go for a bike? Are you going to go for a bike ride today?
I wish I could, but today is going to be a very busy day. I know I can't today, but tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow.
We had a crummy weekend, and now we're back to having a nice weather. That's how it always goes.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it looks like I'm looking out my window right now. It's very sunny, blue skies and clouds. Doesn't look like any rain in the short-term forecast.
I'm sure your patients will forgive you if you say, hey, I'm going to step outside for half an hour, get a bike ride in. They'll probably appreciate
I'd love to do that.
They want their doctor happy and healthy. Doctor, one more time. I know we're up against the clock here. One more time. If people will get in touch with you, how can they do so?
You can just go to our website and just Google Midwest Interventional Spine Specialists, or just Google Midwest Spine Back Pain, and you'll find us. But the phone number is also 219-836-7246. And we're in Munster, Chesterton, Dyer, and Hobart.
There you have it. Any final words before we take off for today?
No, I mean, I think like you hit on one great thing. It's sunny outside. Please get outside. I want everybody outside. Hopefully it'll be warmer soon. It's not quite warm enough yet, but it's still, better than it was. And we should, everything gets better if you have some sunlight and you have, just the opportunity to get outside is what you can feel grateful for.
Sunlight, very good for mental health.
Yes, absolutely.
Some people buy those lights just to look at the light to,
Right, right.
I don't know the science behind that, but I guess looking at light improves your mental health. We'll just say that.
Getting in sunshine does, I think. Getting outside in the outdoors. I mean, if you go to places like Colorado or even like the dunes, some place where you have natural beauty, I mean, people really feel better in those places when you can go hiking, in the woods, on trails. You're going to walk those things. That really is an incredibly powerful thing, and so many people don't really experience that. They don't really get out of their city lifestyles. They ought to go to a place where they can walk out in nature.
See, that springtime weather just perfect for that. Summertime, when you get to the 80s and 90s,
It's tough.
it's tough to walk around sometimes, but
Yeah.
this weather is perfect for it. So we'll
Yeah,
take it.
absolutely.
We'll take it, Doctor. Doctor, until next time, have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Have a good one.
All right,
We'll see you.
Dr. Sean Kondamuri.
Bye.
We'll end the video here in a few seconds as far as that go. But again, check them out. Midwest Spine Interventional Spine Specialist. Got to get interventional in there, spine specialist. Check them out for all your spine needs. Again, sometimes you don't even need surgery. He'll take a look at it. Might be something simple as just some exercise as well. So check him out if you wish to do so. He's on from time to time with us, talking about all things physical and mental health, as we talked a lot about today. In the meantime, I will end the video right now on